Namaste. In our today's module, we will be understanding the different functional states of ego, understand how to diagnose an ego state, and also the concept of ego defense mechanism and its types. As you see in this slide, you are seeing the parent ego state, you are seeing the adult ego state, and you are seeing the child ego state. In the parent ego state, the critical parent is described as moralistic, judgmental, and authoritarian. The nurturing parent is described as reassuring, caring, supportive, and understanding. Similarly, in the adult ego state, this state is described as non-judgmental, open-minded, confident, and reality-based. The child ego state is described as adaptive child, rebellious child, and free child. Functionally, ego state refers to a description and the process of the ego states and their respective ways of behaving. Functionally, the parent ego state is subdivided into the critical parent and the nurturing parent. The nurturing parent represents more affirming, more pleasant qualities of what parents and society do for a person, while the critical parent's behaviors generally present the corrective behaviors of real parents and the prohibitive messages of the society. The adult ego state. This state is not related to the person's age but more to a developmental state. It is a logical, rational way of contacting the reality. The adult ego state is principally concerned with transforming stimuli into pieces of information and processing and filing that information on the basis of the previous experience. It is quite similar to a data processing computer. The child ego state is typified by the I statements like I want, I need. Child ego state is a function of impulses and desires to find pleasure and be happy. Functionally, the child ego state is comprised of two aspects: the natural or the free child, which is spontaneous, intuitive, creative, pleasure seeker, while the adapted child is a compliant and the one who conforms to the wishes and demands of others, particularly the parents. The adapted child ego state represents human response which has some negativity in it, some kind of resistance, some reaction, and some deeper hostility. A disobedient child, a rebellious teenager, and a person with a personality disorder may be said to be in the adapted child ego state. Now let us understand how to diagnose an ego state. Eric Berne states that there are 4 types of diagnosing an ego state. They are behavioral diagnosis, social diagnosis, historical diagnosis, and phenomenological diagnosis. Behavioral diagnosis is also called operational diagnosis. Here, we judge the ego state of a person by observing him and hearing him. That is, by hearing the words and tone of speaking, associated gestures, postures, facial expressions, breathing rate, and the depth of breathing, as well as the muscular tension that is referred as body language. Look at some of the examples for the body language. In the child ego state, if we look at the body language signals, the person will be with folded arms, stooping shoulders, tense facial muscles, downward curled lips, or body turned away. They also will have poor or avoiding an eye contact or rapidly shifting the gaze. The breathing will be either rapid or shallow. The legs will be rocking, frequently the shifting position. This kind of body language states that the person is in the child ego state. The adult ego state body language signs are open arms, relaxed and open shoulders, maybe one hand in the pocket, relaxed facial muscles, body mostly square to the audience or the other person, very good and appropriate eye contact, breathing is relaxed and deep. They generally have controlled leg and hand movement. Now let us look at the parent ego state body language. In this state, usually the person keeps both his arms in the pocket or placed on the waist, face resting on the hand, an aggressive posture, direct and intense eye contact. Breathing is short and labored. So this was about the behavioral diagnosis. Now let us understand the historical diagnosis. By getting information about the past from others or the person himself or herself about their childhood, about their parents or the parental figures, we could diagnose the ego state. Historical diagnosis is identifying the present experience with a past one. Social diagnosis or transactional diagnosis. Response evoked from others around give us a clue regarding our own ego state. The idea behind the social diagnosis is that other people will often relate to me from an ego state that complements that one I am using. Therefore, by noting the ego state they respond from, I can get a check on the ego state. Phenomenological diagnosis. When a person re-experiences what he or she experienced as a child, rather than just remembering it, it is called the phenomenological diagnosis. In this diagnosis, a person is made to re-experience his past in its full intensity along with associated emotions and feelings as he had experienced then. Now let us understand ego defense mechanism. Sigmund Freud noted a number of ego defenses which he refers to throughout his written works. His daughter Anna Freud developed these ideas, elaborated on them, and added further of her own into them. Many psychoanalysts have also added further types of ego defenses. Ego defense mechanisms are unconscious psychological processes that help an individual to prevent anxiety when exposed to a stressful situation. These mechanisms are important in a psychiatric practice to assess an individual's personality dynamics, psychopathologies, and modes of coping with stressful situations. Why do we need ego defenses? We use defense mechanisms to protect ourselves from the feelings of guilt, anxiety, which arise because we feel threatened or because our id or superego becomes too demanding. Defense mechanisms operate at an unconscious level, helps us in warding off the unpleasant feelings, makes us feel good, better, and ego defense mechanisms are natural and normal. But when they get out of proportion, then neurosis develops. Problems like phobias, obsessions, hysteria, all these things can develop. There are different types of defense mechanisms and are divided into immature, mature, and neurotic types. Let us first understand the immature defense mechanism. The immature defense mechanism is also called as primitive defense mechanism, and these kind of defense mechanism arise from anxieties with intimacy or its loss. They are encountered in pre-adolescent years and in adults, especially those affected by personality disorders. Among the different defense mechanisms of immature version, acting out is one, often seen in individuals with borderline or antisocial personality disorder. Example, instead of just saying, "I am very angry with you," the person who acts out may throw an object at the person or at the wall, which acts as a type of pressure release. The very common example that we can give here is a child's temper tantrum. This temper tantrum of a child is also a form of acting out when they don't get their way with the parent. Self-injury is a third type of acting out in which a physical pain acts as a substitute for that which a person cannot stand to feel emotional. Idealization, perceiving and focusing only on the best qualities of a person. Example, a worker describes his boss as being the best in the world, ignoring any flaws. We all have come across this kind of thing in our life. The kind of role models that we choose in our life, we keep talking about their best qualities, we keep bringing out their strength and keep ignoring the flaws in their personality. Such kind of thing is called as an idealization ego defense mechanism. The next one is denial. In denial, the person has the refusal thing to accept reality or facts. He prevents an individual from dealing with disagreeable feelings. Ignoring the reality of a situation to avoid anxiety is one of the features of denial defense mechanism. Projection. Projection is a psychological defense mechanism proposed by Anna Freud, in which an individual attributes unwanted thoughts, feelings, desires, thoughts, and motives onto another person. This is also called as displacement outward. Projection is a common coping tool for avoiding the unpleasant feelings. It's one of the defense mechanisms that can crop up if you find yourself in a situation where you feel like a fish out of water. Perhaps you're interacting with a group of strangers and haven't been able to connect with anyone yet. You feel uncomfortable and a bit anxious. You start to see that others are staring at you with what you perceive as critical or a judgmental eye. So this kind of thing is called as projection defense mechanism. Displacement is a defense mechanism that involves an individual transferring the negative feelings from one person or a thing to another. It is the redirection of unpleasant emotions or impulses towards another person or another object. The theory is that a person deals with the tension or anxiety associated with negative feelings such as fear or anger by releasing them on a non-threatening target. Although displacement can serve a positive function for a person, it can also lead to negative consequences that may affect a person's life and relationships. Repression. There is a fine line between denial and repression when it comes to defense mechanism. With repression, the mind makes the decision to bury the memory in the subconscious, thereby preventing painful, disturbing, or dangerous thoughts from entering the awareness. Repression is also called motivated forgetting, employed by the ego to keep disturbing or threatening thoughts from becoming conscious. Not being able to recall a threatening situation, person, or event. Thoughts that are often repressed are those that would result in feelings of guilt from the superego. This is not a very successful defense in the long term, since it involves forcing disturbing wishes, ideas, memories into the unconscious, where although hidden, they create anxiety. It is an involuntarily pushing an unpleasant or unacceptable feeling or thought from the consciousness. Example, a young child forgets being bitten by a dog, but in the later on in his life develops a phobia of dogs and is scared of them. Now let us understand the mature defense mechanism. These kind of defense mechanisms are more sophisticated and require more experience and self-awareness. Mature defense mechanisms help approach reality in a more meaningful and socially adaptive way. The mature defenses are defined by the healthy and conscious relationship with reality. In this approach, the uncomfortable feelings and thoughts are deliberately transformed into less threatening forms rather than being pushed aside. People decide and choose to cope using mature defense mechanisms. They don't just occur spontaneously. In that, we have altruism, another means of transforming uncomfortable feelings and thoughts, but this time by helping others suffering from similar feelings and thoughts who are less far along in dealing with them than myself. It is dealing with stressors by dedicating oneself to meeting the needs of the others. It helps individuals through constructive service for pleasure and satisfaction. Example, a person who died in a road accident, his family member, looking at it, forms an organization for creating public awareness about traffic and road safety. The next mature defense mechanism is humor. In humor, the person expresses uncomfortable feelings, often in the form of jokes, without causing oneself the discomfort. They focus on the funny aspects of the painful situation. Example, A man with sleep apnea makes jokes about his continuous positive airway pressure mask. Another example we can give here is when a person accidentally slips and falls down during a function or in a crowded place, he gets up but just makes a joke on himself. Sublimation. Satisfying one's wishes or impulses in a socially acceptable manner, channeling them rather than preventing them. Sublimation means socially unacceptable impulses or idealizations where they are transformed into socially acceptable actions or behavior. This possibly results in a long-term conversion of the initial impulse. Example, a childless elderly man who always wanted to have children spends a lot of time teaching his nephew badminton. Suppression. Suppression is deliberately ignoring or an uncomfortable or unacceptable impulse or emotion to diminish the discomfort and accomplish a task. Individuals cope with distressing mental contents by voluntarily making efforts to put them out of conscious awareness until there is an opportunity to cope adaptively with those stresses. Example, a student breaks up with his girlfriend the night before an important exam. He does not show any emotion until he has taken his exam. Counting to 10 when angry before taking action is a very good example of suppression. This technique is also very useful in everyday life. The next defense mechanism is anticipation. The devotion of one's effort to solving problems before they arise is the anticipation defense mechanism. It deals with the stresses by anticipating the consequences and feelings associated with possible future events and considering realistic solutions. This defense mechanism may be present in someone who prepares for an important job interview by practicing their answers to the toughest questions. Thinking about health problems due to overweight and working on a lifestyle change is also considered as an anticipation defense mechanism. Now let us summarize what we studied in our today's module. We understood the different types of the functional ego states, wherein we understood that functionally the parent ego is subdivided into critical parent and nurturing parent. We also understood functionally the adult ego state is not the one that is related to the person's age but more to a developmental state. And we also understood that this adult ego state integrates all the other ego states with reality. The child ego state is similar to the Freudian concept of id operating on the pleasure principle, unconscious, aimed at gratification and fulfillment of needs. While the child is about expressing feelings and being intuitive, functionally the child ego state is comprised of two aspects, the natural free child and the adapted child. We also understood the four types of diagnosing the ego, they being the behavioral, social, historical, and phenomenological diagnosis. While understanding the ego defense mechanism, we got to know that it is an unconscious psychological process that helps an individual to prevent anxiety when exposed to a stressful situation. The necessity of a defense mechanism arises when the demands of the animalistic id contradicts with those of the idealistic superego. In order to maintain mental homeostasis, and protect the conscious mind from the effects of such conflict, the ego makes use of various defense mechanisms. These mechanisms are thought to be of paramount importance not only in maintaining mental stability in normal individuals but also in determining the psychopathologies in psychiatric patients. Many defense mechanisms happen unconsciously as an attempt to protect our ego and to avoid uncomfortable feelings, thoughts, or impulses. Many of them have been classified into mature and immature defense mechanisms. Mature mechanisms arise from experience and self-awareness. They include altruism, distraction, humor, sublimation, and suppression. Immature defense mechanisms arise from anxieties. They are often found in people with substance use disorders and personality disorders. They are dissociation, acting out, and projection. Neurotic defenses may be the closest to the mature defenses, but they can cause pain to either the individual employing them or to those around them, subjected to these defense mechanisms. In the neurotic defense mechanism, we understood displacement, intellectualization, repression, and reaction formation. We conclude this module, and in our next module, we will be understanding the connection of ego with the brain. Till then, Namaskar.